My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 32 years old, live in Portland, Oregon, and if you asked anyone who knows me, they'd probably say I'm the kind of guy who keeps it together, logical, dependable, career-focused, maybe even a little cold. I work in finance, risk assessment, ironically fitting because in my personal life I don't take risks, except once. Her name was Julia Merrick. She was my boss's wife. And before you jump to conclusions, let me tell you how it all started. It was April, just before tax season peaked. The office at Wexler and Brandt was a war zone, people running on caffeine, paper cuts, and existential dread. I'd been pulling 12-hour days for weeks. Promotions were being whispered about like forbidden magic. I was on the short list. One more good quarter, and I'd be made senior partner before 35. My boss, Charles Merrick, was the kind of man people feared without ever seeing him get angry. A calculating storm under a quiet smile. He ran the firm like a general with the kind of discipline that crushed weakness. He also didn't believe in work-life balance, a concept he called emotional indulgence. That's how I met her, Julia. She came into the office one evening to drop off something Charles had left at home. I was the only one still there. She wore a navy peacoat over a white dress and carried herself like she didn't belong in a place full of spreadsheets and suits. "You must be Ethan," she said, smiling like we were already friends. "Charles says you're the one to watch." I remember blinking, startled by how warm she sounded, like someone had opened a window in a smoke-filled room. "That's flattering," I said, standing. "But Charles doesn't usually give compliments." She laughed softly. "Exactly why it stuck with me." We talked for maybe 5 minutes. She mentioned she used to work in publishing in New York. Told me she hated how Portland always smelled like wet pine and regret. I said something dumb like, "It's better than Manhattan's garbage chic vibe." She laughed again. Not politely, genuinely. When she left, I didn't think about her again for at least a week. But then I saw her again. It was the company's 20th anniversary party, held at Charles and Julia's house. A sprawling estate tucked into Forest Heights with a view of the city that could melt your bones. Everyone was drinking and pretending to be looser than they really were. Charles was making the rounds with investors. I saw Julia standing on the balcony alone, sipping red wine, looking out over the lights. Something in me, maybe the exhaustion, maybe the loneliness, walked me out to her. "I'd trade all of this for one slice of New York pizza," I said. She turned, surprised. "Ethan." "Julia." She smiled. "You remember my name." Hard to forget, the only person in this crowd who looks like they actually want to leave. She tilted her head. "So what are you doing out here with me?" I hesitated. I guess I wanted to feel something real. The moment hovered, trembling like a held breath. And then she said, "I used to come out here alone and dream of being rescued. Isn't that pathetic?" "No," I replied, "but I don't think you need rescuing." She didn't answer right away. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Maybe not, but maybe I still want it." We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. But something passed between us, undeniable and terrifying. I left that party with my heart on fire and my morals ash in my throat. 3 weeks later, I drove to her house. It was a Friday night. Charles was in Seattle for a corporate summit. I told myself I was going to return a book she had lent me, some poetry collection we talked about, but I knew that was a lie. When I knocked, I expected hesitation, confusion. Instead, she opened the door in her nightgown, soft white silk and bare feet, and said, "You're late." Not a question, a fact, like she had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I stepped inside. The night unfolded like a fever dream, slow, burning, dangerously clear. We didn't rush. It wasn't lust. It was something else. Something that felt like we were rewriting the rules of who we were. Afterward, lying in silence on the edge of her bed, I said, "This is going to destroy everything." She turned to me, brushing her fingers across my chest. "Then let it burn." But of course, fire always leaves scars. Because 2 weeks later, Charles called me into his office. Door closed. No smile. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside, photos. Me, her, The balcony. My car outside his house. A shot, blurry but unmistakable, of Julia kissing my neck in her doorway. "I trusted you, Ethan," he said, calm as a glacier. "I made you. You spit in my face. Couldn't breathe. You're finished here," he said. "But I won't bury you. That would be too generous." I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I walked out of Wexler and Brandt with a cardboard box and a future that had just gone up in smoke. 2 days later, I went back to Julia's. But the house was empty. No lights, no cars, no Julia. I called, texted, emailed. No reply. It was like she vanished. Gone. Like she never existed. 3 months. That's how long it took for the numbness to settle in. Like frost on a window. Like the kind you scrape off every morning but always returns by nightfall. After Julia disappeared, I became a ghost in my own life. I moved into a cheaper apartment, downgraded to freelance consulting, and cut ties with anyone remotely connected to Wexler and Brandt. Portland became smaller, colder, lonelier. My days blurred. Nights were worse. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. with phantom memories. Her voice, her laugh, the way she used to reach for my hand mid-sentence like it was just muscle memory. And yet, I never heard from her. Not once. Until 6 months later. It was a Thursday. Cold. Rainy. Portland never changes. I was sitting at a downtown cafe, laptop open, trying to pretend I still gave a damn about a quarterly risk model for a logistics firm in Cincinnati. That's when I saw her, across the street. She was walking quickly, holding the hand of a small boy. No umbrella, just her, and a child. Julia. I stood so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. I ran outside, dodging traffic, almost getting hit by a Prius. "Julia!" I yelled. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Her eyes met mine and widened with something I couldn't place. Not fear, not regret, something quieter, like sorrow dressed in acceptance. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Instead, she looked down at the boy beside her, maybe 4 years old. Brown curls, big eyes. He was the mirror image of her. "Who is he?" I asked, breathless. She hesitated. Then, "My son." The words punched through me. I stared at her, at the boy. My throat tightened. "Is he?" She shook her head. "No, not yours." I couldn't tell if I was relieved or heartbroken. "Why did you disappear?" I asked, voice cracking. She looked around, cautious, then whispered, "Because I had to." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give without ruining everything," she said. "Ethan, it was never just about you and me." We sat in her car for 20 minutes after that, parked 2 blocks away. "He had me followed," she said quietly, eyes locked on the windshield. "Even before the night you came to the house. Charles always suspected I wanted more than what he gave me, and he wasn't wrong. He found out." "Of course he did," she nodded. "But what you don't know is, he offered me a deal." "What kind of deal?" She took a long breath. "If I agreed to disappear from your life completely, leave Portland, go through a quiet divorce and sign an NDA, he'd let me keep full custody of Liam and walk away with enough money to start over." I stared at her. "Jesus." "He said if I contacted you again, he'd bury you. Not just professionally, legally, financially. He had ways, Ethan. He always did. And you chose that over us?" "I chose my son." That silence was heavier than anything I'd ever known. Later that night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of whiskey and a stomach full of regret. I hated Charles. I hated what he'd done to both of us. But a darker part of me hated that she agreed to it. And then I hated myself for thinking that. Because love, real love, sometimes means choosing who you need over who you want. A year passed. I moved to Vancouver, Canada. New job, new city, clean slate. I dated, occasionally, casually, but no one ever made me feel the way Julia did. Like I'd been seen for the first time in my life. Then one day, as I was walking through Stanley Park on a gray October morning, my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I answered out of habit. "Ethan," came the voice I hadn't heard in a year and a half. "Julia, My knees actually buckled. "I only have a minute," she said, rushing. "I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just needed to tell you something." "What?" "I kept the book, the poetry one. You wrote your name in the margin next to a line. Do you remember what it said?" I closed my eyes, heart racing. "The ache of absence is love's cruelest proof." "I remember," I whispered. "I read that line 100 times," she said. "And every time I thought about what we lost, what we almost had, and what we gave up for something bigger. I wanted to say so many things. I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry." But instead, I asked, "Are you happy?" She paused. "I'm free," she said. "And sometimes that's all we get." Then she hung up. We spend our lives chasing things we think will make us whole. Promotions, status, perfect love stories. But the truth is, some stories aren't meant to be perfect. Some are meant to tear through you like a storm, so you can finally see what was blocking the sun. Julia taught me that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go with grace. And maybe that's the kind of love that lasts the longest. Not the one that stays, but the one that changes you forever.